So good evening, everyone, saying welcome to our meeting. We're starting right at, according to mine, 6 p.m. And Jessica, if you would you perform roll call?
Yes. As Joe Pictionary had communicated that he had a prior schedule conflict, so he's not here this evening. So Brittany De Alicante.
Present.
Barry Lenz.
Here.
And Michael Bean. Terry Dillon.
I'm here, thank you.
Jen McCauley.
Here.
And Eric Adams.
Here.
And that completes roll call this evening.
Wonderful. You should have received the minutes. Wondering if you've had a chance to look them over, if any input or changes need to be made.
As I read them, I would make a motion to approve them as written.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Is that a motion? Is there someone that would second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. I think that was Eric. And so we have a first and second, all in favor of approving the minutes as presented. How about just a raising of the hand? Thank you. And Jessica, Michael is now with us, so you probably saw that, but I wanted to make sure.
I've got 6:02. We are prompt.
We thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Very good. Business from the audience. Just again, wanting to say as a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. The committee will listen to your comments, but will not respond to public comment until the committee response portion of the meeting agenda. Meeting minutes will be taken by staff and forwarded to the city council and city manager. Members of the public can always send written testimony to the committee or city council. As we begin our meeting tonight, I'd like to ask members of the audience to please keep yourself on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. Public testimony, we will allow speakers 2 minutes each for a total of 20 minutes. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak either of those times, please use the raise hand feature to make the request. You will be called upon when it's your turn to speak. Please identify your name, Springfield ward number, and subject you'd like to speak about. For people calling in by phone only, you are in listen mode only and cannot be called upon. And so then at this time, if there's any business from the audience, we receive that at this point.
At this point, there is no one indicating they would like to speak.
Very good. So then I don't know that there's any committee response that we need to give to this portion. So we will continue to move on with the agenda. And that's business from the Springfield Police Department. And so if Chief Shearer would take on this, that'd be great.
All right, it's good to see everybody again here tonight. One brief update is on Monday, November 15th, we're going to initiate some organizational structure changes within SPD. And the changes primarily are intended to do 3 things. One, provide an enhanced level of support for and focus on the non-sworn professional staff and our records and dispatch work units. It's to more equitably balance the personnel among all our different divisions, because one of our divisions has the bulk of the membership of SPD in it. We really need to level that out to have a little better, a more effective span of control for folks. And 3 is to create a non-sworn professional staff position as a member of our senior executive staff in the organization. Right now, there's a chief and 3 lieutenants that are considered the command staff of the organization. We've created a new position and elevated it essentially to the equivalent of a lieutenant in the police bureau, or not the police bureau, the police department, to sit at the table and be part of those critical decisions for the organization. So there's a new business services manager position that we created that's going to oversee records and dispatch. What used to be called patrol, we're going to now call it the operations division. What used to be called investigations and records, we're going to call that the operations support division. And then the jail is still going to be referred to as the detention division. The biggest shift is going to be that the records and dispatch are now going to fall under that business services manager position. And several of the smaller units that are in operations are going to shift over to operations support. So that's going to balance things out a little better. But the best part of this whole message is I want to recognize Jessica Crawford because she applied for and was selected for this new business services manager position. She has a long history at SPD, 17 years of experience and a wide range of skills. I know that I've prepared her for this super important and challenging job.
Nice,
She's got
Jessica.
She's got expertise
Yeah,
in budget
excellent choice.
management, project management, managing all these complex citywide project initiatives. She has a deep understanding of the SPD culture and has clearly demonstrated in a lot of different ways her engagement with community, her role here on SPAC just being one of those. So I'm super excited to have Jess on board as part of our senior executive team. She's extremely deserving of it. And I'm excited to see the ideas and the energy that she's bringing to the table and look forward to the year ahead.
Nice.
Yeah, hope it comes with a raise.
It does. She's very deserving. And one other thing, so I want to introduce, I think most of you probably know Lieutenant Crawley. He's on the call here tonight, and also Sergeant Brian Humphreys. Sergeant Humphreys leads our Canine division. So in the business from Springfield PD, we're going to talk about some proposed policy review. But then in the business from the committee, I know one of the things you're going to talk about is the Canine policy, and Sergeant Humphreys is here on the call to be able to answer some specific questions related to Canine policy as well. So we've got access to him. So we'll dive right into the policy review. On policy 1.5.1, which is our use of force policy, there's a handful of changes we want to introduce and bring them to your attention. There was significant change to this policy earlier this year, but we've since reviewed it and identified other things I think where we need to make changes and provide further clarification for the officers. So we want to bring those to you. And there's, I think, 4 different sections that we're going to talk about. There's chokeholds, the responsibility of members that are on scene directly following an officer-involved shooting, changes to the use of force committee. So 3 sections I think we've made changes to in that policy. And then after we talk about the use of force policy, we've got our authorized weapons policy. And the reason we're specifically talking about that is because that is the policy that dictates our use of the taser. And we've made some changes to that as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Crawley to talk about the specific changes that I just kind of give you a brief overview of.
Thanks for having me again. It's been a while since I've seen most of you. I want to also congratulate Jessica Crawford for the announcement about her position and what she'll be doing for the police department. She plays a big role with us. To go over some of the changes in use of force policy, I'm going to start off with the Section 5 chokeholds, head, neck, and back restraints. Basically, the change to that is basically to simplify it for our officers. Policies in government are often very wordy, and when that translates down on a worker bee level, sometimes it helps to have a very clear direction. So we just changed some of the wording in there to make it very clear that the department member is not justified in using that force that's been described as a chokehold or a restraint. Anything that impedes the breathing and the circulation by applying pressure to the throat or neck, except when deadly force is authorized. Instead of just listing ORS numbers in there that require officers to look things up, we try to keep it simple. The next change, one's a title change as far as officer reporting requirements. We just changed some wording, and supervisor responsibilities have to do with when use of force reports are routed, making sure that the professional standards sergeant, when they review it, if they determine any kind of non-compliance, either through policy or state law, they're going to forward their findings to the chief of police, requesting further investigation. The biggest change in this policy this go around has to do with on-scene responsibilities following deadly force incidents. So you're going to see a list of definitions to start off with, and that's just to make sure all of our department members know what role they play in these type of incidents, whether they're an involved member, a witness member, a supervisor. We spelled out exactly what a public safety statement is. So everybody's, clear on that. Then we started going with directions for our supervisor when they're on the scene of a critical incident like this, how they're to contact the involved member and then solicit a public safety statement from that member. And one of the changes we made is the attachment, which actually is the SPD public safety statement, and asks a lot of questions having to do with the initial response to the scene for the infant team. It's going to ask some safety questions, direction of rounds if they were fired, if there's witnesses, if there's injuries. So there's a baseline for investigators to begin investigating this type of incident. So the supervisor now has a very clear idea of what's expected of them at these scenes. And where our officers and supervisors have always done a good job at these scenes, it always benefits our employees to have a clear direction. Same goes for, I'm scrolling down, looking at the witness members. If need be, they will also provide a public safety statement, and those questions will be asked right down on a form. It's not going to be a willy-nilly, inconsistent manner of asking questions. It's going to be very structured, so our employees know what to expect. Our supervisors know how to ask those questions. Obvious on-scene supervisor responsibilities as far as taking action on scene, what they're supposed to do. We want to make sure not only our supervisors but our officers responding to a scene understand the best way to control that scene, and establishing single entry points, making sure there's a secure perimeter, and establishing a crime scene log are the biggest changes to this section of the policy. And we want to make it very clear that who's in charge of doing this, and that there is a written policy that dictates how a crime scene log will be taken care of. Scrolling down further, more on-scene supervisor responsibilities regarding the perimeter and the scene. More definitions for other responding officers. A definition.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Meek.
When you say you're scrolling down,
I'm looking at a computer screen.
at just yours,
Yeah.
okay? And so I'm scrolling down on mine. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
No, I found it. I had paper, and I found it easier to have it on the computer so I can read it and still somewhat look at the monitor here.
So where are you? Are you on the Forts Review Committee number 9 or down?
Right now, I'm just at page 9. Yes, I'm almost down to use of force investigations. Right now, I'm covering the on-scene supervisor responsibilities.
I'm now scrolling with you.
Okay, very good. I already touched on the crime scene log changes. So I'm going to keep on scrolling down to Force Review Committee, and all it is making sure we're the proper wording is, the heading is in there for that section. But we also added a little bit of language. Now, I'd like to say we came up with all these ideas on our own, but I think some of these ideas have come from recommendations made through the OIR group having to do with the Canine settlement, and we realized when subject matter experts or educated people have information to present to us that we can include in our policies, I think we'd be crazy not to take advantage of that. So one of those recommendations had to do with a debrief of our employee after a use of force, and making sure they were aware of what the use of force review board or committee is going to present to the chief of police. So we added a paragraph there. It's highlighted in blue. It's section, looks like it's section 12, I believe. That indicates upon conclusion of the force review board, will present findings to the involved employees prior to presentation of the chief of police, and that member may choose to respond to the use of force committee for consideration prior to the committee's presentation of the chief of police. The key to all this is this committee does their investigation. It allows the employee to add something they feel wants to be added, and it gets presented to the chief. Ultimately, it's the chief's determination of how to handle these matters, and I think Chief Scherer can speak to that if he chooses later. But that's the ultimate message to get relayed here regarding this thing.
Should we ask questions as we go along?
Yes, I'm actually done with that policy.
I noticed in the Force and Review Committee that it's a 40-hour CIT training. And then the other person will have an expertise in crisis intervention training, which I think is really terrific. However, 40 hours is just a week. But I also noticed in the Canine that they're required to do annual training and review of the training. And I'm just wondering, on something like Force of Review, is it just 40 completed and done, or is there ongoing training review?
There's ongoing training involving CIT. There's ongoing training on a number of things, but the 40 hours, making sure they have a minimum of that training completed in order to be a member of that committee, in addition to our CIT expert who's had even additional training.
So
So
they
all
have,
of our officers will get additional training.
so is there a certain amount of yearly, like in my profession, CEUs, certain amount of training we have to complete every 24 months?
There's something similar for police. I think most of us are on a 3-year cycle. So there's officers, there's supervisors, there's different leadership and administration rules for training. Everybody's on a cycle to where they have to have a certain number of years or a certain number of hours of training within that 3-year cycle. And that's dictated by the DPSSD board out of Salem.
Okay. I just thought the Canine was more thorough.
I also
Yeah,
have a
right.
quick question.
Yes.
Are there any opportunities for the public to know about any of the findings of the use of force committee? Or is that, I know the chief gives like an annual use of force presentation. Is the committee's findings included in that at all or anything along those lines?
I don't know. I imagine the chief will give some kind of review to council or to city leadership regarding the force review committee. I think that will trickle down to the public from there. I'll let the chief speak to that about what he may intend to do on those type of matters.
Yeah, we want to be as transparent as possible. I mean, part of the purpose of the use of force review committee is to determine if there was any policy violations in there, and the potential exists that the policy violations that are addressed, like with internal, could result in discipline. So that's kind of sticky with the city attorney and personnel records and stuff as to how much of it we can share. But I think the goal is to be as transparent as possible, to talk about lessons learned and to show that, yeah, we're evaluating thoroughly everything that we're involved in, with the goal being to improve how we do business and make changes that make sense.
A question for you, Chief.
Yeah.
It says that the chief of police shall provide the involved officer with a written statement of his findings within a reasonable time. What's your definition of a reasonable time?
That's a great question. I guess it's going to depend on the situation and if there were significant policy violations and if there's discipline involved versus something that is much more straightforward. So there has to be some wiggle room built in. Some could probably be done relatively quickly. I'd say within, 14 days, 30 days, something like that. And there's others that might take, 60 days, 90 days before we can compile a written document to provide to them.
Okay, so there's no end time though.
No.
Does anybody else have any questions about this policy before I move to our working policy on 1.6.1 on authorized weapons and use?
Let me catch up with you.
Okay.
I gotta find my version. You sent it to us early, made us read it, so I highlighted things in yellow.
Very good.
All right, I'm there.
Okay. So moving to our general order 1.6.1, the changes that we are looking at doing at this point, if it's near the end of the policy, if you want to scroll down, I put it in red font to make it a little bit easier to find. It has to do with the use of tasers. And the first thing you'll notice is I'm not calling them tasers in our policy anymore. They're going to be called conducted electrical weapons. a CEW, and that's kind of an industry standard term that's being used by experts throughout the industry right now. So part of doing policy review is making sure we're updating our terminology and being consistent with what other agencies and entities use. The language itself has to do with changes of the application of the CEW. So at this point, we're indicating that our officers shall avoid the use of more than 3 CEW applications against the same individual unless exigent circumstances exist. And those exigent circumstances are some kind of immediate or serious bodily harm to a person is about to occur, and that would warrant more than 3 applications against the same individual. The next line is going to indicate how only one member may deploy a CEW at a given time intentionally on a subject, except where lethal force would be permitted. And that's going to hopefully avoid multiple officers using the same type of force on one individual knowingly. We don't want that to happen. We want to try different types of use of force, see what works, evaluate the use of force, and determine if we need to upgrade or downgrade from there. And having multiple officers deploy a taser at one time, as we've researched it and contacted everybody from the manufacturer to other departments, changing how we deploy a taser in that manner was very important. Next paragraph talks about a 5-second CEW cycle. And what we're asking our officers to do is reevaluate that situation after that 5-second cycle has been deployed on our tasers. We recently purchased new batteries for our tasers, and the batteries have a 5-second cutoff. At the end of 5 seconds, that taser will have to be reactivated again on it with an affirmative trigger pull. That's a change from our old equipment, and it's the new industry standard of how to deploy a taser. So we're asking our officers, if you're going to deploy a second cycle, you need to reevaluate the situation, determine if that second cycle is necessary. If that's the case, provide a warning to each additional cycle and wait a reasonable amount of time for that subject to comply with the orders that's being given to them in line with the CEW deployment. And we've articulated in our reports that we expect the officers to describe and explain the reasonableness of each cycle that they're deploying. Not just, I use my taser because blah, blah, blah. We want to have clear, articulate reasons for why each cycle is deployed. And then the last paragraph in there, it's somewhat in line with some findings from the OIR group relating to the Kenny lawsuit, indicating that we are going to be reaching out. The supervisor is going to obtain the taser, download the information, and we're going to reach out to the manufacturer for additional analysis of that taser deployment. We already are able to get some analysis from a download of the taser. However, there's enough data in that analysis to where I think it warrants reaching out to the manufacturer to say, hey, can you explain a little bit more about what this report indicates as far as the length of time, anything in here, the time and day, how many seconds this was deployed, and make sure we have a second set of eyes taking a look at that deployment, making sure that we're understanding the information that we've downloaded from the device.
So
That's
how many times can you pull the trigger? Every 5 seconds? Is there like 20 in a cartridge or? I'm not familiar with the new kind.
I mean, no, you can pull that trigger. The difference is going to be is that when the probes are in contact with the person, you can pull that trigger, but once the probes become separated or come off the individual, it doesn't matter how many times you pull that trigger, they're not going through those wires. So at that time, you use a drive stun where you're actually contacting the skin to actually get that effect of the taser. So there's not a limit of how many times.
Is there a tracker on, for instance, I have this inhaler and every time I pull it, a little number goes by. So I know how many times it's been used. Is there anything like that on the taser?
Not on the device itself. However, once the device is brought in for a download, it will track exactly how many times that device was deployed and give the date and time it was deployed and for how long it was deployed.
Excellent. Do you know how lethal they are?
I do not know how lethal they are. I'm not going to pretend to be a subject matter expert in the taser use. I'm sure there's stories out there about instances where something like that has occurred with the right circumstances. However, they're not viewed either industry-wide or by us as a lethal weapon.
But they're designed just to sort of stun, not to.
Correct. I can tell you, Mr. Bean, that I've actually been tased, and it was the most uncomfortable 5 seconds of my training career. But I say that to bring a point of after that 5 seconds is up, it's as if nothing happened. Your body immediately goes back to normal function, and then when it's activated again, that 5 seconds is really uncomfortable and makes you want to do whatever you're being ordered to do. So the long-term effect of it typically is not there.
So it gets your attention. It actually doesn't stun or daze.
It it gets your attention. I could say that for a fact. Any yes, Jenna.
I was just curious. I appreciate that you have in there now like a specified number of times that you expect it to ever be used. Do you guys have any data or record on how many the average deployment has been up until this point? So in cases where a taser has been deployed in the last 4 years, do you have any record, or did the old tasers not have that function so you couldn't really track it?
It was within our policy prior to this, even that every time a taser was used, for it to be brought back and for a supervisor to download the data from the taser that would say how long it was deployed for and for how many activations. So this new technology is simply a 5-second cutoff to where you can't just hold it down and run it for 30 seconds. It actually cuts you off after 5 seconds and requires an affirmative trigger pull to reactivate it another 5 seconds.
I guess what I was wondering is it going to be a big departure for officers to have just in how they interact with the public in terms of just 3 deployments rather than, I mean, like, was it a time when it was multiple times per incident?
I understand what you're saying now. And no, I think it's not typical to continuously, I think they say that the definition of, can't think of the terminology, to repeatedly just do it. Most of our officers haven't just done it without even thinking about going to something else. Usually after 2 or 3 times anyway, we're looking at, hey, this isn't working, we need to try something else. This just puts it in policy so everybody is a clear understanding of what our expectations and the community's expectations are regarding the taser use. I've not seen
Like multiple
cases where that's happened more than a couple of times.
I guess that's what I was getting at is it going to be a big change for folks to remember just 3, or if it was going to be fairly standard now?
And you bring up another point. Me just giving this policy to our officers is not enough. We actually have taser training coming up later this month. I actually maybe in the beginning of December, and it's going to be in conjunction with some other use of force training, to where everybody's going to be deploying the taser and going over the rules, not just reading a policy and being told, remember, it's only 3 times now. That point is going to be hammered home by instructors, and when they're actually practicing with the taser, they'll be reminded of it at that point. And that's how we learn. And we can read policies all day long, but the words don't necessarily hit home after you read page after page. So it'll be stressed during use of force training coming up by the end of the year, and reminding people of these new rules.
Good to hear. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes, Mr.
Michael, you're muted, but I think Terry also has had her hand up for a little bit.
I
Terry,
have a yellow hand. I'm sorry. I apologize. Go
well,
ahead.
it's okay.
Hi, yeah, my question is, I think I read in this policy a little further up where the officers would be carrying tasers when they're available. Does that mean not all the officers have the taser?
All
or the
officers
CW?
that are trained on taser use are carrying a taser. There's going to be times, there's a couple exceptions. A newer officer, when they go on, if we don't have an instructor to sit down and explain how to use the taser and go through that training, they're not going to be issued that equipment until they're instructed the proper way to carry it. The secondary caveat there would be if for some reason a couple of tasers break and they're not available to be carried by that person that day, obviously we have to order more. We always have some spares on hand, but in the instance where there's not one available, that would be that condition.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do they wear them on their belt?
They have a choice of wearing them on a belt or on a leg, thigh holster on their leg. It's different for different people. Some of us are a little bigger, have a little bit more waistline, and we can fit more things on our belts. Other people, we're running out of room to put things on our belts. There's so many different things we carry now. So there's an option to carry that on a leg holster instead, to make sure they have that option available to them.
And are they bright yellow so they're not confused from the actual weapon?
Yes, they are, and not all agencies do that. Different agencies have different reasons for what they do, but we like the fact that it is a bright yellow device, and not only does it let the officer know I'm bringing up this bright yellow device in front of me and my peripheral vision seeing that, other officers on scene will see that also, and they'll be able to react appropriately to this bright yellow object in the hand.
Great.
I think we've heard this before, but I'm actually not remembering. How often were tasers used? I think we saw those numbers at one point, but I don't think I have that in my head.
I don't have that handy. I know we presented it last year in our use of force
Yeah.
presentation. Those numbers are in that report.
Okay.
And it will be in the annual report again next year. I don't have those numbers at hand. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Yes, Chief.
I just want to touch on a couple of points. One, and I think this is part of what Jenna was getting at, or maybe it was Terry. It's not optional whether somebody wants to carry a taser. If you work patrol and you've had the training, you're expected to carry the taser. So it's something that everybody who's trained does have as an option on their belt. It's not just something that you can just not feel like taking the taser out today. The expectation is you will have it. And the second thing is when it comes to tracking use of force, whether it's taser or anything else we've talked about, our ability to really track at a granular level what we've done in the past year and analyze what works, what doesn't, how many times we used it and all that is going to be greatly enhanced, because just this month we rolled out the software that's called IA Pro that tracks in a very detailed level all the force that we use. So once we start using this for the next 6 months, 12 months, we'll be able to look back during that time frame and know exactly how many times it was used, how many trigger pulls were on each instance, did the officer say it was successful or not, and really do a clear evaluation of that. Because I just saw in the media for a large city in Oregon here, there was an article earlier this week where they found that their taser deployments only work roughly half the time. And so, but you could argue they only work half the time, but you could also argue that they do work half the time. So it's not like it's a bad tool. It's just not the end all be all. It's just another option for us to consider. But anyway, what I'm getting at is we'll be able to have a lot more granular data moving forward that'll help inform how we plan our training and everything else, because we're implementing this new software system starting this month.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me back. Letting me talk to you about this stuff. I look forward to watching the rest of the presentation. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
So I believe next then is the business from the committee, and that's a part of, we've selected certain policies that we're going to review throughout our meeting times. And the first one is the Canine unit policy review. So would someone go ahead and lead that for us, please?
Or Barry, were you wanting us to go through that, or did you have questions about that policy that we can answer for you?
So thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not very clear. I thought that you were planning to share that policy or make comment on it and review that with us. Am I mistaken in that?
Yes, we can do that. I was, since it was business from the committee, I thought you were going to have questions for us for that we could answer. But we could probably, or Sergeant Humphreys, would you be able to kind of just go through that policy? Do you have it up in front of you and just hit the highlights unless folks have questions
I have a
from the
couple.
review?
I have a couple questions.
It looks like we do.
Brittany, do you have a couple?
Yeah, I have questions too, but you can go ahead and get started, Michael. Go for it, and I'll jump in too.
Yeah, I was doing my homework. I noticed that the officer who becomes the canine specialist, he's kind of stuck there for a while. It's something you can't just do for 6 months and go somewhere else. And then he's also stuck like on the evening and night shift all the time. And he takes it home with him. Is there any special consideration for those kind of folks? I mean, I think they're heroes, but boy, that's a big expectation. If something else opens up in the department, you're kind of where you are.
I'll let Sergeant Humphreys touch on that, but before I do, I just want to say, it's not that they're stuck there. I mean, it truly is a real privilege to get that job, if that's what you're getting at, and they really love this work. It's critically important. It's probably one of the most important patrol programs that we have. I'm a huge supporter of the Canine program for a lot of different reasons, but you're absolutely right. It is a long-term commitment, and it's a very serious position that we take seriously who we select for that. And with that, I'll let Sergeant Humphreys take it from there.
Thank you, Chief. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for having me today. So I've been a part of the SPD family for about coming up on 27 years. I've spent about 18 years of my career as part of the Canine unit as a handler, and the last 6 as the supervisor of the unit. So the Canine unit and that Canine assignment, as the Chief spoke to, is very highly sought after and a desirable assignment. An officer that gets into the Canine unit is not stuck there. The ask is that when an officer puts in for the Canine unit, that they make a commitment to the working life of that dog. And the reason for that is that it's a substantial amount of training up front to bond to that officer with that dog. And it takes some time for an officer to really become a very versatile and effective canine handler. So the ask is not that they're stuck there. The ask is that they commit to a certain amount of time that working dog is effective and to its best use to the city of Springfield and the taxpayers. If an officer 2 or 3 years, and we've seen this happen, say wants to go to detectives or wants to go to motors or something else, there's nothing saying that they can't do that. And there have been officers that have left the unit prior to that dog retiring, and that dog can be assigned to another handler that moves on for the rest of that working dog's life. So it's not a matter of being stuck. It's just an ask that we want a commitment that this is it is a lot of extra work, and it is a big commitment. We just ask up front that the officer is willing to take that on. Officers are also not stuck on one particular shift. That was truer when we were on the Stewart plan previously, when we had 3 shifts, because for a myriad of reasons that I could speak to if you wish, there's not as much need for a police canine on day shift. And when there is a need, it's a much harder application just due to the amount of people out and about and road traffic and foot traffic and things that kind of deter or detract from the dog's olfactory system and the nose work that is the reason we have canines. So previously, the typical day shift hours from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., we did not run dogs on that shift. We ran them on a night watch and graveyard shift. Now that we're on a 12-hour shift, officers work primarily either 4P to 4A or 8P to 8A. But if an officer comes to me and says, hey, because of family or because of sleep patterns or whatever, I want to go work 8A to 8P, that's totally acceptable. Within the unit, I've got 4 dog handlers, and all I ask them is that we're a small team and we talk it out each shift rotation. And I want 2 dogs at least on night watch, so that 7 days a week there is a dog on duty from 4 p.m. on. And if the other two handlers want to work during the daytime, they can do so at this point.
That's great. I was being facetious about being stuck because my hobby was I'm a dog trainer. I used to train them in agility and obedience. And I had 2 AKC that I grand championed and provided 2 to the Tokyo Police Department, because in Tokyo, I was doing the Australian cattle dog and they need a much smaller version to fit in their squad cars. It's a labor of love, and the love is really there. Right?
Absolutely, and it's folks like you that train dogs to that ability level, and that's where our dogs come from, is Europe, and the sport of Schutzen is so important over there, and part of their their sport culture, that we can get dogs that are trained in tracking, obedience, and protection, and it's very, very easy to transition those dogs into police work. So what you're talking about, sir, is exactly the kind of dogs we want for police.
Yeah, it's great. I'm long retired from that, but when I was
A lot of
younger,
work.
it was a passion. Yeah, but it was great stuff.
Brittany, you had some questions?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you again for sharing all this. This was a really interesting one to read for me. Looking at the guidelines for the use of police service dogs, I was just wondering, and it was kind of nice that we had the use of force policies brought up at the same time as this, because I was wondering, so I can see how items 2 and 3 are kind of like more specific to dogs, but number 1 seemed like kind of just like a broader use of force guideline that's similar to the stuff we saw in the policies earlier. And I was wondering if there's any guidance for like when to use dogs versus other types of force. Is that outlined anywhere, or are there kind of, I guess, general expectations for that?
So yeah, so the general expectation is that the handler that knows that dog and its behaviors and demeanor better than anyone else is solely responsible for choosing when and if that dog is deployed. So even if, say, a supervisor says, I want you to put a dog into this situation, the handler has carte blanche authority to say, no, I'm not okay with that because of my dog's ability or inability to do that task. So our dogs are primarily selected and used for their olfactory system, for tracking people, for building searches, as a locating tool. That's the primary reason we have dogs. So as far as use of force, the dogs fall under use of force if they are to grab someone or take someone down, but that is a very rare thing that happens. Most of the time, they're just used as a locating tool, and the use of force part of that is secondary. And they have been shown and upheld numerous times by the courts that they kind of fall in the same area as an impact weapon. So if you're authorized to run someone down and tackle them to the pavement, or use an impact weapon such as a baton or something like that, the police dog and the use of the police dog as a use of force tool falls in that same line.
I actually, Brittany and I are usually thinking the same thing, because I thought it was really nice that they came parallel at the same time. And I was just wondering if it's common for canines to be called out in use of force policies, even if, on what level or articulated at what level, so that kind of everybody knows that they're an impact weapon. They sound scarier, but this is kind of where they fall in the continuum. I appreciated, that articulation of when there's a bite and that kind of thing in the dog policy, but I was wondering if there was ever cases where they speak to one another or they're kind of cross-referenced in a use of force policy.
Well, the canine policy does cross-reference the use of force policy. And the dog is been outlined by the courts as falling under that level of a use of force. So the city of, there's a case called Kerr versus the city of West Palm Beach that occurred in 1989 when a gentleman was bit by a police dog, and they initially asked the courts to make the police dog a deadly use of force. The court, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that is not accurate or appropriate, and numerous courts have upheld that since. So the way we govern our police department's canine team and our policies and procedures are based on court ruling and on a number of things that have happened throughout the 40 years that canines have been used in police work. And again, our dogs are used primarily, all departments' dogs are used primarily as a searching tool. We have dogs for their olfactory systems that are, arguably 1,000 times better than a person's, and so they're used as a searching tool. So the use of force part of it, while it is an important piece of canine deployment, it's rare, but the way it falls on the use of force continuum has been outlined by the courts, and that's where that falls.
Perfect. Thanks. That's why we love that you guys come and present this, so that we'll know that to share. So thank you for that.
I'm very impressed with your training requirements out of all the policies I've read. The officers need to be certified in the patrol performance standards, and they have to be trained twice a month. They have to get together with you. I guess you're the supervisor, and they have to recertify every year. That's thorough training. I wish everything was as thorough as that. So I'm impressed with that.
Thank you. So yeah, national average and what the courts have upheld as a reasonableness expectation is 16 hours per month for a patrol service dog. We train 18 hours a month as a unit, and then the officers are required to do ongoing on-duty training on their own. So they usually average between 24 and 26 hours a month. We attend 2 seminars a year that are run by the Oregon State Police Canine Association, where we have speakers that are up to date on case law, and we have 2 or 3 days of working seminar where handlers from all over the state of Oregon, usually roughly about 150 of us, get together at different locations around the state and train, so we're all up to date and on the same page. The Oregon Police Canine Association also tracks the state standards, which is what the officer has to pass in order to be considered operable on the street. And we do certify once per year by a trainer outside of the city of Springfield. So we have our own trainers in-house, but we don't certify our own dogs. We go to another department and ask one of their trainers to put eyes on our dog and make sure that everything is appropriate and sign off on that. In addition to that, my handlers certify through those OPCA training standards. We do that every single training. So twice a month, my handlers certify with those OPCA state training standards. And then once per year per the OPCA, we have another handler sign off on that for their annual certification.
That's impressive. When you get together with all the other dogs and officers, how well does Springfield perform?
I'll be completely honest with you, sir. Our canine program is very, very good, and I would argue with anybody that we're one of, if not the best in the state. And I can show that with the number of tracking fines that we have, and how many bad guys that we take off the street with our dogs, and how many people we find in and around Springfield for other agencies as well. We have a very versed, very well-trained, and very high caliber police department canine unit.
I hope the canine competition comes back next year.
Thank you. Me too. I've missed
Yeah.
it 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been, too bad that we've missed a couple of years, but we're looking forward to next year.
Hopefully this year it'll be back this coming summer.
Right.
Very good. Other questions that anyone on the committee has? All right. Thank you very much for sharing that with us and for your time tonight.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Jessica, for just procedure, we just go through the policy and are making comments, asking questions, but there's not an approval process at all that we go through, correct?
That's correct. It's
Yes.
From an advisory and review capacity, and I
Yeah.
just take notes and make sure to memorialize the comments and questions within the minutes.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. Perfect.
For sure.
Just can you help me now on this next section as we get into, because it was brought up at our last month's SPAC meeting. It is the committee council communication planning. And it was brought up, and I think most of us were unfamiliar with what was the expectation. So we are looking at tonight to better understand what is the expectation and what that looks like. And if you could, if it's appropriate, if you would give us an overview of what that means and what that looks like, and then we could ask questions, would that be appropriate?
Perfect. So first of all, I am sorry for one of the few times you actually needed my presence because I had a little bit more information. I wasn't here. I feel like I let the team down, so sorry about that. So yes, there is a requirement outlined in the council operating policy and procedure that does require a meeting between the committee and council at least every other year. And I did not know that that was specifically spelled out. So I learned something. And at the same time, I'd like to share that without realizing it was a requirement, the city manager's office prior to last month's meeting had reached out and proposed a specific meeting time to accomplish that. And they'd proactively done that, but I didn't insert it into the agenda that month because I wasn't going to be there to help facilitate it. So it was just one of those timing issues. So I think I said it's in the last section, and I believe it's in section 6 of the council operating policies. And we had talked about this meeting about sharing my screen, and I'm happy to do that, but sometimes it's a little bit more trouble than it's worth. But I was going to propose to share it on this one just so everybody could see. I think it's all on one page. So if that's okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so this, can you see my screen, the council operating procedures policy, and it should have just section 6 there? Okay.
Yes.
So this is where it outlines this requirement, and what it actually also does is identifies that each committee will designate one member of the actual committee to serve as the liaison to city council. And that was also new information to me. So upon review of this council operating policy and procedure, it appears that we need to formally designate someone to be a liaison, to make sure that they're the ones that are having the discussion, and the designated committee member to communicate with council. I can facilitate from a staff liaison perspective, but it appears that there's actually a separate individual from the committee.
Yes, and that person is strongly encouraged to attend all the city council meetings before anyone volunteers.
Yes. And so that was an additional perspective that I wasn't aware of. So that is something that we don't necessarily, as your committee, you can choose to take action on that at this point, or you can choose to kind of discuss and decide who that would be in the future. I did want to share that the city manager, like I'd mentioned, they had proposed meeting actually in February of 2021 to have a meeting between the committee and council for an update. And at that time, by that time, we would definitely need to have that board, that liaison member identified. And in addition to that, our committee bylaws do reference an annual report. And we had been seeking some standardization of what that report would look like, but I went ahead and just borrowed and created a template for what I think that annual report could look like if we so choose, unless we get further direction from the city manager or city council in the meantime. So, and I'd already been working on that as well. So those are really, that's kind of where we're at in this. And I realize it seemed a little bit, it was just hard to articulate in the agenda, but I think we have 3 action items here. We have a committee to council liaison to identify.
Yep.
We have from that some direction on which February meeting to formalize our meeting with city council to provide that update. And I will definitely help facilitate the scheduling and paperwork associated with that. And then in addition, just discuss the logistics of how you'd like to prepare or how you would like to direct the preparation of the committee annual report.
Very good. Why don't we start with just questions first? And I apologize if you could help me understand the second one. I understand the liaison and also the annual report, but does the whole committee meet with with the city council
Annually,
annually?
once, February.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Oh, I'm speaking out of turn. I apologize.
Well, no, go for it, please.
The way it reads, it does, I'm not sure it needs to be the entire committee or not. So I can make sure to get that clarification.
Okay.
My reading, I understood it that implied that. So.
Jessica, I apologize. I don't have it at my fingertips. When did the vacancy or the postings close for our vacant neighborhood positions?
So, and that's, yes, great point. It actually closes tomorrow. So applications through tomorrow. Next step on that is once they have the applicant pool, the city manager's office is actually coordinating that, but they will get with me to schedule the interviews. And that will happen in November. And I believe selection, I don't have the date at the tip of my fingers, because I think they did a slight modification. I believe it's going to be early December. Terry?
Yeah, hi Jessica. Would this committee liaison, would that begin like either this month or December, or would it wait until January?
And that's actually where the committee kind of starts making decisions and leading that portion of the discussion.
I see. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if you were asking your question based on, do we want to wait and see if new folks are coming on before we try to appoint someone? And so that I was wondering that.
Well, it's twofold. I hate to have a new person step in and then by the nose, they get
Yeah.
that role.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was dawning upon me as I was preparing for this meeting that Terry is really our only official neighborhood liaison in terms of, that broad perspective. I think we have great perspective, and I always appreciate our conversations, but I know that we currently have 3 vacant spots. And so there's a portion of me that is wondering if this is, even in the selection of who represents us back to the council, makes sense to have those additional voices. That was all. I don't have a strong opinion either way. It's just something that was really resonating with me as I was preparing.
Yeah. Okay.
And kind of relatedly, one thing that could be good to get clarification on, and kind of related to if it's the whole council or not, is if it can be multiple liaisons, if we can appoint 1 or 2 people, like if a new person comes and wants to do it, but they want maybe backup from somebody who's been here a while, if that would be a possibility. That's something I would be interested in knowing.
Well, I read it all, and I think it should be somebody that I agree with Jenna who's been here. And I'm not sure I want to wait till January to hear the new members, because they probably go, well, we want to listen to you. What do you want to do?
Sure.
So they probably won't be up to speed till March. So I think we should take this opportunity and elect a liaison and go for it, starting right away.
Then my question would be, is there someone, instead of us appointing someone per se, is there someone that would be interested? Because Terry, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I would be interested if no one else is. I don't want to step in and stop anybody else from the opportunity as well.
Okay.
Well,
Is there someone? Go ahead, Michael.
I'm not volunteering me, but I was hoping to get some BIPOC representation. And I thought Brittany might be a good start as a new beginning for our group. You may not want to do it, but optics.
No, thanks, Michael. I would do it. But if Terry really wants to, I'm not like necessarily chomping at the bit to want to, but if, I mean, I agree that representation would be really helpful in this instance. Yeah, that was kind of a non-answer, sorry. I don't know. And I guess, what is the procedure for was it just like our standard voting procedure?
We can arm wrestle for it.
We can okay, rock, paper, scissors. That's what we do.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Or maybe we could do it together, Terry. I don't know. I mean, that would be
That's my
something.
question.
Yeah,
Can-
yeah. I
could
would
it
love
be
to do
done
it with Terry, if
together?
that's a
And
possibility.
I
Jessica,
think
do you
that's a
know?
great idea.
And in his absence, I feel the need to sort of represent Counselor Pishinari, and he would say, everyone is welcome to the council meetings. And a lot of the role is making sure that we are familiar with what they're talking about and they're a little more familiar with what we're discussing. I don't see why it couldn't be sort of a dual.
I think that's a
agree.
great idea.
I love the concept of both of you representing us and the go-between. I think that's an excellent idea. Eric, you have your hand raised.
I was just gonna maybe offer an alternate of that to say that there should be maybe a primary and an alternate in the event someone's unable to attend a council meeting due to vacations, life, whatever the case may be.
Very good. Thoughts on that, folks? If we went with one is in a sense whatever terminology we use, but both would attend, but one would be the representative or the however we want to term that. Jenna.
I might offer, because I like to create sustainability, so forgive me for all of that, but I'm just thinking Terry is currently our vice chair. And if we created sort of this like pattern of opportunity for folks to be involved with the committee and then be an alternate for the council position, and it was more closely tied to that vice chair role. And so that in the future, we knew that if you were stepping into that vice chair role, you were also taking part of the council liaison role, because we ask a lot of our chair in terms of agenda planning and those kinds of things. That second role, it would be sort of that learning position as they prepare to then lead the committee in the future. We'd give them that knowledge base. That alternate to the council role would be the person that's sort of prepping to step up, just in sort of a systems way.
I'm comfortable. Others. Brittany, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
I just like the idea of appointing our own and not tying it to a position or trying to institutionalize it. That's just my opinion.
I'm a systems nerd, Michael, so it's totally okay if we don't go that way. I just
I understand.
like the succession planning.
Eric.
Succession plan.
Do we need a motion to one
Yeah.
effect or another?
I believe we do. We need a motion and a second and then approve whatever we decide here. Yes.
So as an initial attempt at establishing some structure and system for Jenna and others, I move that the vice chair be designated as the role of primary liaison for the committee with co-election of an alternate to serve in their absence as needed.
Very good. Would someone second that? Jenna will. Discussion? Okay, one I don't see on my screen. Go ahead. Someone was going to say something.
Yeah, a little clarification. So I guess if I'm potentially the second person, I just want to be clear. So I wouldn't be liaising with council actually. Like, it would be Terry the one who's liaising, and then I would just be a backup if Terry couldn't do it, or would I also be liaising?
I would think that you would also
Okay.
be there.
Okay.
That's not what we're voting on, though. It's exactly that. Terry would be it. And in her absence, you would be the alternate.
Okay.
But
Okay.
but all are welcomed at the council meeting.
Yes, yeah, and I already love listening to the council meetings. So wait, yeah, I guess then maybe that's not. I didn't understand that previously. Cause I think I would maybe prefer to still be like what Terry is suggesting to do it together kind of, and Terry can kind of be like the lead on it, but I would still be participating even.
So
Yeah.
we could
I would
ask
like-
permission to do just what was suggested. We'd have co-liaisons. They would both be liaisons from this committee to the city council. Yeah. And
Okay.
it's a good
I
idea.
think that's a great idea.
Okay, so can we make a new motion? And then have that. seconded?
I believe we got to vote on this one.
Oh, you're right. So, Eric, your hand's up.
I will respectfully withdraw my motion.
Ooh,
Thank you.
Robert's Rules of Order. Very good.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping me in line. I appreciate that. So now I need a new motion. Michael, would you make that?
Yes,
if you
I
will?
move that we submit co-liaisons from SPAC to the city council.
Perfect. Second. Jenna, thank you. I can't see Terry, but if on my screen, but all in favor, there we go. Thank you. All in favor, raise your hand, please. And that passes unanimously by the committee. Okay. So that takes care of that piece. Now, Jessica, talk me through again on the are we as a committee meeting with the city council in February? Is that what our next decision is to make?
No, we need to vote for
Thank
the liaisons.
We did that.
We just did.
Right.
Oh, I thought we voted to have 2 liaisons, but we didn't put any nominations forward like Terry and Brittany to be the liaisons or I missed it.
Oh, okay. Well, then we do need to do that.
Like Jenna, I'm a policy woman, so.
Yes, thank you. So Michael, would you make that motion as well?
I move that Brittany and Terry be the co-liaisons from the SPAC committee to the city council.
Perfect. And I need a second.
Second.
Thank you, Eric. All in favor of Terry and Brittany being our co-liaison? Raise your hand. Perfect. Passes unanimously. Okay. Now, should we move on to the second one that Jessica's put before us, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So, and that is, I believe, as a committee, the SPAC would meet with the city council in February.
Correct. There are 3 dates available.
Okay.
And February 7th at 6 p.m., February 14th at 5:30, beginning at 5:30 to 7, I guess is the option. And then February 22nd, 6 to 7. It would be a 20-minute slot. We can put a request in for a particular portion of the work session. However, logistics happen and you don't always get whatever, what we ask for, but we can respectfully request to make sure that we're.
Can you repeat those 3, or at least the first 2 dates, Jessica, please?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to mention, my thought is I didn't want to send this out in an email so that it could be confused. I also didn't expect it to be necessarily scheduled at this moment.
Okay.
More to introduce the concept, introduce the general timeline and the options, and maybe make an agreement on when we could respond with a preference of which meeting. So I just want to be clear. We're not getting our calendars out right now.
I think that's a good idea. I like that. If that's okay with others, is that it would be sent out now that we better understand in an email with the dates and the time. Is that an in-person meeting, by the way, or is that a Zoom as well?
It is currently Zoom.
Okay. So would it be acceptable to folks to get that email from Jessica and see the dates, and then we would give her our preference for a February meeting?
Excellent.
Okay.
Great. And then just that last piece, and it doesn't kind of the same idea. It doesn't have to be right now, but it is the concept of an end of year report from SPAC to council. I would, just because I am also a fan of process and tying things up in a bow. There's no specific timeline, but it would be great if it could be prepared and finalized prior to the meeting to council to accompany the discussion. So that to me just makes sense. What another committee had done is it was a fairly simple yet informative 1 to 2 page document of an overview of the committee's purpose, top accomplishments for the prior year, and future priorities. More of a kind of a bullet point with a brief description afterwards. But that was just a model that I saw another committee utilize. I did reach out and ask if there is a standard. I reached out again just to see if there's any standardization of the format they prefer, but I can send that out, but really it's just me proposing a format.
Yeah, I think we need a committee because this has been a politically charged year and we've had a lot of citizen input. And I think that's something that should be addressed clearly and pointedly in the report. And I think it will influence where we are and probably where we're going. That'll take some getting together in a committee.
So are you suggesting a smaller team of this committee, Michael, working on that?
Yeah, I was thinking Eric could lead it.
Eric's got his hand raised.
Where are you now?
Humor, we have humor.
I did have one question actually about the content of the report, though, is a topic that we've kind of brought back around a couple times over the last year is, you know, the charge and mission of the committee itself. And so I'm wondering if this might be an opportunity for council to weigh in on that topic, or at least present it to them with the goal of coming back to it at a later date.
To impact the report or what our mission is going forward?
To include that in the report is, you know, maybe a goal for the committee is to have further discussion or clarification from council or, you know, city leadership, because I mean, committee members feel free to weigh in at this point, but are we certain that we know of, you know, what the charge of the committee is, given sort of the change in tenor and environment that we've been operating in over the last year?
Yeah, we reviewed that quite a bit. My vision for the report was to go over the minutes and input of all the months and encapsulate that. And we started with a thorough review of what our mission is, what was in the bylaws, and where we should go. I don't think, in my opinion, we need to revisit that or ask for even more input, but to try and clearly and concisely say, this is where we've been, and this is where we are, and this is where we like to go forward. You know, the city council may just disband us if we go outside the boundaries or the playing thing, but I'm not sure we should ask permission.
I'm wondering, Michael, if you would be willing to take some lead on this because you're speaking so passionately about it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I wonder if there would be another person or two on the Jenna.
I because I think that I understand where you're at. I too, we went from quarterly meetings to monthly meetings to continue to create space for community awareness and community input. And I would love to make sure that we capture that in a meaningful way to take to council and say, this is what we did hear from our community. And not only that, but this is how the committee and the department have responded to that and sort of the adjustments that we made. So absolutely happy to help. Michael will take the lead.
And Brittany, I think you were interested as well.
I would love to participate too.
I need
Another
Jessica.
one, go ahead, Michael.
I need Jessica. And I'm worried that she's getting promoted and won't be available to us.
That is a question I have, and I saw you put that in the chat, Michael. Jessica, are we losing you as our person as you get promoted?
Not yet. You
Okay,
got me. If that's
okay,
right.
that's a good thing.
Excellent.
I'm very grateful for that. So Jessica, what if Brittany and Jenna and Michael and you began to work on this, and would it be acceptable to bring it back to the committee as a whole for us to see before you submitted it to the council in February? So that would give you
Oh, absolutely.
2 months time with Christmas in between all that to put that together. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, it shouldn't be that long.
Perfect.
And as a staff liaison, it is my role to remind you that any gatherings that are going to discuss anything of substance do need to be.
Open meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
So I'd be happy to facilitate that, and it'll be similar, a similar format to this, and we can just record it. And since that would be the end result would be summarized and brought back to SPAC from our prior experience, the recording itself can stand as the minutes, so it wouldn't have to be in a minutes format. So just a reminder.
Do you record working sessions?
You have to do one or the other. You have to, yes. So
Okay.
last time we just did a recording, it was very good. And we did a summary of that effort and brought it back to SPAC, which met the public meeting requirement.
Perfect.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you all for that piece. Jessica, is there something else for us to talk about with the SPAC bylaws?
Actually, just the SPAC bylaws was the annual report piece.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something.
Nope,
Okay.
thank you for checking.
Yes. Then I want to check and see if there's any other business from the committee that needs to be brought forth or discussed at this time.
I had one question.
Yes.
I saw on the bylaws that you put up, Jessica, that our committee is 10, but I thought Joe said they limited it to less than 10.
Yes, I haven't received the formal updated bylaws and charge to articulate the change to 9.
And I was asking when that was done, and no one seemed to know, or is there an updated formal?
Not that I have received. So I will have an answer for you.
Okay,
Is that fair?
yeah, that's good. That would make our job going forward easier.
Great.
Terry.
Hi, Jessica, have we gotten or received a new roster? I'm looking at my old one at least, and I'd like to communicate with Brittany a little bit for an email address. And I don't have her email address or phone number or any other way to bug her.
I can definitely provide an updated roster.
That'd be great. So Brittany, I'll talk to you soon.
That sounds perfect.
Thank you both for doing that for us. That's wonderful. Other business from the committee? Very good. Then it's 7.
I have one more question.
Oh, yes, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Brittany.
I know
Yes,
you're
was
about to go
gonna-
to. It's actually
was
for the chief. I was wondering, and speaking of like listening to city council meetings, I was listening to your presentation that you gave on the 25th, which was excellent. Thank you. And one thing I noticed was that there was potentially possibility for participating in interviews, or that you've been trying to recruit members of the public to participate in them. And I was wondering what the process is for that and how one goes about getting involved in that if they want to.
That's a great question, and we haven't developed a formal process for it. We've reached out to a handful of people and had limited success. We were on kind of a time crunch trying to put these together, and it's a little onerous for some folks because it's all day, sometimes on a weekend, sometimes on a Monday. But yeah, if you were willing to sit on interviews or you have folks that might, please feel free to reach out to us. We haven't developed a formal process yet, but we're always looking for people that have the ability to sit over, all day long in some of these interviews, because we need the same person to sit through all the interviews for consistent scoring. But hopefully that sort of answers your question.
Sweet.
Brandy, I did that on one of the rounds and I got a free lunch out of it.
Oh, they give you lunch too? Oh, no, that'd be awesome. I am actually interested in participating. So I'll be in touch, and I might know some other folks too. That's great to know.
I would also be interested in that, Chief.
That's great. Thank you.
And I'm not anymore.
You got your lunch. You're good.
But I did learn the Springfield Police have a revolving account at Hole in the Wall Barbecue.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay. Other business from the committee.
I just wanted to know, Chief, you've been here, what, couple months now? How's it feeling?
It's been 5 already. Feels great. I'm having a blast. There's amazing people here. Like I shared, I've been in law enforcement, coming up on 30 years, and I can tell you that the folks at Springfield PD, they really genuinely have a lot of pride in this organization, in the work that they do every day, and being SPD members, not just cops, members of SPD. And that's something that you don't see everywhere. And it really is refreshing. I don't know if the people of Springfield really, truly appreciate how good of a police department they have. Like I said, we're all human. There's areas to grow. There's things we can tighten up and where we can do better. But at the core, you have an organization made up of tremendous folks, and it's great. It really is.
You've been through a lot in the last 5 months. I mean, a lot. And you just don't look fazed by it. So I'm impressed. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Just gonna do the best I can.
Any other business from the committee? Okay, I just want to say thank you, everyone. That we've had some shorter meetings. Tonight was longer, but boy, you were hung in there and did great. I appreciate that very much. So it's 7:22, and I will now officially adjourn the meeting. Thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.